stocks and things.
Right. I'm
So
going back to a barter economy. Everyone pines for the day. Oh, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have money? It's like, yeah, no. You
not
want to
so
go back to
much.
those days?
mean,
Trust me, for all the
yeah,
problems our current economy has, which are legion, it
our
definitely is an
legion.
improvement over what we
Yeah.
used to do.
You're listening to Were You Still Talking? I'm just thinking about what you just told me. Okay. Hey, welcome back. This is Joel Albrecht, and in the studio today I have Doug Lynam. He was on a career path that has been wilder than a roller coaster designed by a Salvador Dali on Sugar High. Whoa, that's quite the description. From Marine Officer Candidate School to 20 years as a Benedict monk before emerging from monastic life to become a financial advisor, which is the main thing that attracted me to him to have on the show. Financial advisor, business coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author. His 2 books, From Monk to Money Manager and Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with Enneagram, revolutionized how we understand our relationship with money. His popular TEDx talk on finding purpose and wealth has garnered over 400,000 views. Douglas, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Joel. It's great to be here. Well, honor.
It is. It's an honor to have you. I'm always amazed when people get over. I would say over 10,000 views, but
It takes some effort.
it takes some effort. It does indeed, and it's got to be good or really weird. But yours is more in the good, good
Hopefully
category,
both.
or both. Yeah, or both. So I'll just get us started with the thing I'm most curious about. Well, gosh, tell me the story. You went from Marine to
Yeah.
Benedictine monk,
Yeah.
and how did that happen?
Oh,
Like,
well, it's a
what?
long story, obviously. I wrote a whole book about it. I'll give you the cliff note. But yeah, basically I grew up in a kind of affluent family in suburbia of Chicago, and where it felt like from my childhood perspective, it felt like money was weaponized. It was used to manipulate and control, and your love often felt conditional. And do the things your parents want you to do, you get the toys, and if you don't, you don't. And or sometimes I'd ask my mom for something, and she'd be like, "Well, go ask your dad. He's got the money." And you ask your
Oh,
dad for something,
sure,
he's like, "Well,
sure.
go ask your mom," because divorce and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of rebelled against all that. Was looking for meaning and purpose and just something different. And so I ran off and went to officer candidate school with the Marine Corps, and in my sadomasochistic glory, I finished at the top of my class, and then
Wow.
they sent me back to finish off college for a year, and I kind of had it's kind of a spiritual awakening and realized that unresolved anger issues and high explosives were a very toxic combination. So maybe I should try something different with my life. And I went off and, like any sensible person would do, I went and joined a monastery, which made perfect sense at the time. I don't know how I ended up there, really, but it was a great way to annoy my parents. They were absolutely flabbergasted, and you might not realize it, but spite's kind of a reason why I think many young men join monastic orders. It's like, I'll show you, Dad.
That is
And
really interesting. That makes more sense to me joining the Marines than joining a monastic order, but same kind of idea. And
yeah,
yeah, thank goodness you realized that anger and explosives were not a good combination.
yeah, I didn't need to blow up more people around the world just because of my daddy issues. So yeah, then I went and I thought it was just going to be an experiment for a couple of years. I didn't really plan on making a career out of it initially, but it was going to be more kind of grad school and trying to figure out the meaning of life. And I didn't really go into it with a huge faith. I wasn't raised in any particular religious tradition, but I figured if I was going to figure out these deep philosophical questions, a monastery seemed like a good place to park myself for a while and sort it out. And also was a way to escape the world of money and materialism and just put it all behind me. But in an ironic twist of fate, a couple of years after I got to the monastery, our community went bankrupt because we all hated dealing with money. Like, we all had what I would call a very avoidant relationship around finances. And so, uh, for again another twist of fate, I raised my hand and said, "I'll sort this out," and I ended up taking on the responsibility of being the business manager for our community. And pulling us through bankruptcy. I realized I couldn't do a worse job than what my predecessor had done. So the bar was set pretty low. And it was sort of the blind leading the broke. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was at least trying. So jumped in there, you read every book on finance I could find, sorted it out, got good at dealing with money. And then I realized that a lot of the monastery guests, they would come to our community with spiritual problems and they'd ask me to pray for them. Like, yeah, I'm happy to do that. But you know what? A budget would also work pretty well too. We could maybe do both, we don't need to have to one day are mutually exclusive. We could actually take some positive action and realize if I could actually solve people's financial situation, I could relieve a lot of suffering that they were going through. So that became my form of service for guests for years. Fast forward, again, it's a long story. I will get to the punchline here and just say, basically, after 20 years of monastic life, I got kind of tired of that and decided I had some skills. So I went out and became an investment advisor and started my own firm, but then realized being a solopreneur wasn't really my path. So I merged my firm with a larger company in Santa Fe and was a partner there for many years. And then got written up in the New York Times, got a 2-book deal from HarperCollins, did the TED Talk, took a sabbatical the past year or so to finish this new book, Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram, which we can maybe talk about. And that kind of puts me where we are today.
Wow. Yeah. That was definitely Cliff Notes, because I'm sure there's some stories.
Lots of stories. Oh my gosh. Where do you want to start?
20 years in a monastery. I'll just ask one question. What would you think was the hardest part about being a Benedictine monk?
Well, I think the hardest part is just like in a marriage. It's community. It's like, it's the best part, and the hardest part is community is the best part. And then living with a bunch of brothers that you sometimes have disagreements with and trying to get along. That's the hardest part. And also who you love and who love you. And so it's just about the daily grind of trying not to annoy everybody too much with your own crazy or being annoyed by other people's crazy. So, well, I'll give you an example. Like there was this one brother I call him. This is where I kind of figured out what I call these money monsters. Like there was this one brother, I call him Brother Pius in my book, because he refused to touch money for any reason. He thought touching money polluted the soul, it dirtied the hands, made you somehow corrupt or unclean or whatever. And it was like, okay, well, so you're not going to touch it at all. That means somebody else has to touch it a whole lot more often, so your hands stay clean, which hardly seems loving or kind. And it was really just what I realized, that it was a kind of ego inflation. Like you can reject money for the wrong reasons, and that can inflate your ego just as much as grabbing after it for the wrong reasons can inflate your ego. And they're both two sides of the same dysfunctional coin, and kind of got me down this rabbit hole wondering, well, what are all these different messed up ways that we relate to money, either wanting it too much or not wanting to deal with it at all. And that's kind of set me on this path to figure out the psychology of money. Like, how did all of us, including myself, like what was it inside me? What was my damage, and what was the damage of those around us? I just started seeing patterns, and these patterns would repeat in monastery guests, and then in my clients and my advisory practice, and you just see these same recurring themes over and over again. And that's kind of how I ended up these books on the psychology of money, essentially.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because most of us have all kind of issues. I had a history of money stuff. I had at least 5 credit cards at one point, and had to go through. You can't even do this anymore, but I went through money rehab. Basically, I forgot what it was called, but it was a nonprofit that it really didn't do anything but tell you how to write to all the credit card companies and ask them for forgiveness. No.
Which they generally don't do very much.
They don't do anymore at all. It's no longer possible. That doesn't even exist anymore, that organization, because they stopped doing it. They realized, we don't have to do this. Yeah. But it would ruin your credit score, and the theory was, no, that's what you want.
Yeah.
If you've got that much credit, ruin your credit score. It's
Ruin your
good
credit.
for you. It's not.
7 years of
Yeah.
bad credit score, but better than another 2 decades of indentured servitude to the credit
And
company.
hundreds of thousands in payoffs.
You'll never pay off.
You'll
You'd be
never
stuck
pay it
for life.
off. And
Never pay it off.
when they, it was getting the math shown to me, because it was a time, and I guess it's gone back to this. There was a short amount of time where they started putting guardrails in place so that kids couldn't do this. But when credit was kind of newer, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, they gave me a credit card.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, well, I could have as many as I wanted because I had paid off that credit. I would pay on time. That's all you had to do. Pay on time. Well, we'll give you another one, $5,000 credit. And when you get the card, it only has $1,000 credit, but oh well, that's enough. Yeah, and it's a trap. It's a trap, and it's
Oh yeah, they put credit card booths at freshman orientation in colleges, where like the credit card companies have deals with schools, and they can just basically financially enslave these students, get them young, get them early, get them when they're stupid, and just rack up debt, and then you're just done. Your financial life is kind of toast for a good decade, if not longer.
Yeah, and everything has a credit card now. Every little thing has
Amazon,
a credit card. Yeah, PayPal has credit card.
company,
Airline companies, and the airline companies. Every time I fly, which is not that much, but I go a couple places a year, and I always am like, oh, what a deal! This looks like a good deal. Look at all the miles I get if I get this card today, and then I read it, and it's like the amount of money I have to spend for these miles is way more than the miles.
It's not worth it.
It's not
Stay
worth
away.
it. It's like,
Stay away.
My God.
Debit cards are a great invention for a reason. Thank God we have those now. But
right.
You can't spend money you don't have. So why keep your one credit card for credit emergencies, and that's it. Keep pay it off every month.
Pay it off every. That's the big key, right? Is to pay it off. Yeah, pay the thing off. It took me a while to get that, and to be secure enough that I could do that. And so here's what is money?
What is money?
What is money? Because I think a lot of people, we're just talking about, we have all these myths and legends around it and emotions around it. But what is money?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a medium of exchange at its simplest level. And we could disagree on this. Some people would have different definitions, but I would just say it's stored work energy. You work for $20 an hour, you've stored that hour of labor into the $20, and now you can save it, invest it, spend it, do what you want with it. But essentially it's like you think of chemical energy as like fuel in your car. It's you've stored up energy in form of gasoline or a candle or anything else. It's sort of work energy that you can store up and then deploy at any point in time later on to save or invest spend, save or invest as you see fit.
Yeah, that's a good. I think that's a good explanation. I mean, that's what I meant to ask: is what is your definition of money?
Yeah, that's mine. I mean, you say it's
yeah.
stored energy of some sort, one way or the other.
And that's really what it is energy, right? It's a way to trade our energy without using actual shells and rocks and things.
Right. I'm going back to a barter economy. Everyone pines for the day. Oh, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have money? Yeah, no. You want to go back to those days? Trust me, for all the problems our current economy has, which are legion, it definitely is an improvement over what we used to do.
I love the I'm going to say the Star Trek universe idea, but it's no longer exists. But in the first Star Trek, in the early 60s Star Trek, they had this sort of semi-utopian vision of we don't use money anymore.
Yeah.
They never explained how.
Right.
They never said, because we do it this way. That it was never really laid out there very well. Because
everyone just can infinitely consume whatever they want at any point. How does that work? I don't know.
How does that work? Yeah. And it's funny because now there's, I've really never watched it, but there's a new Star Trek called Lower Decks that's about the people, that work in the lower decks of the starship. And it's like, that was pretty ignored.
Right. I haven't seen that, but it sounds fascinating. It sounds like a great kind of, well, hopefully there's a lot of comedy in that.
It's all comedy. It's
Oh, great.
animated and it's a comedy for sure. It's
Oh, good.
funny stuff, and they make fun of the whole universe. They're
Mhm.
making fun of this idea that they're playing around with. It's kind of funny.
You see the Black Mirror episode about Star Trek? Uh,
Oh, probably. Oh,
it's
yes. Yeah,
USS McAllister.
doesn't that have Jesse Plemons in it?
I don't know actors' names very well,
Okay. Okay.
but it
But
sounds right. Oh, it's
yeah.
so good. If you haven't seen it, there's a part 2 in season 7 or something. There's another one that came out. But if you're a Star Trek fan, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's been a while. I watched Black Mirror when it was new, and then it got really popular, and they kind of changed it. It wasn't as edgy. But yeah, I should go
Still
back
pretty
and
good.
watch that. It's still
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
it's hit and miss, but some of those episodes are just fantastic. Yeah, the Star Trek ones, check those out.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and check that out. Um, now I got on Star Trek. I lost my.
They just do this huge send up on it. It's just great. It's so good. It's so good.
Oh, it's always fun. Always fun. The Saturday Night Live did a Star Trek. Well, it must have been the first or second season that still is one of the best satires ever, and it's kind of forgotten because it's so long ago. But yeah, it's easy. I guess it's easy to do a send up on that. Absolutely.
But if only we could live in a utopia where we didn't need money, where all your needs were taken care of, and everyone's, peace and harmony reign inside the Federation, so to speak. It's like, yeah,
Right, and people have tried.
yeah.
Many people have tried. Many communities have tried, and I've not seen one that's worked out. Maybe there is a place that it's worked out, but
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
I've yet to see it.
even ideally, you would think a monastery should be some sort of utopian where everyone shares everything equally. It's sort of on that model of
Hmm.
each according to their need. It's sort of Marxist in a way, right? Each according to their ability, and each according to their need, right?
Right, right.
And but even there, you find that still money's an issue, and you still got to find a way to work the system, or else you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
They're also going to be because someone who doesn't want to. I don't want to judge this person, but someone who doesn't want to touch money has got just as many problems as someone who wants nothing but money.
Right.
Right? It's the same.
Exactly.
You've got an issue there. Something's going on.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and so I sort of we can get into all that, but essentially, I've with the Enneagram and stuff like that, it's like basically attachment theory. It's what I call the attachment theory of money, which is that we can either be anxious. If you're familiar with you're all familiar with the attachment theory of relationships. Have you heard of that?
No, no.
Okay, well, it's the same idea. Well, it doesn't matter. It's the same
Well,
idea, just applied to a different domain. But
hmm.
it's the idea that in our romantic relationships, attachment theory says we can be healthy in our attachment to our primary partners, or we can be anxiously attached, where we're sort of too clingy and too needy, or we can be distant and avoidant, sort of avoidant mentality towards how we relate. And then applying that to money, the same thing works there too. It's that you can be healthy in your relationship to money, or you can have an overly anxious attachment, where kind of Ebenezer Scrooge would be a good example. Or you watch the TV show Succession or Billions, you see these people who, it's like their attachment to wealth is causing suffering for themselves and the people they love, because it's controlling them, not the other way around. And then there's like the monks and myself in the monastery, where we're just pushing it away out of fear or insecurity or shame or guilt or 1,000 different reasons. But essentially, you're avoiding dealing with money, and that can, of course, cause you just as much heartache, more heartache than the other side of the coin. And then you can kind of mix and match too. So like we aren't all
Right.
one type
Right.
all the time. So like there's what I call the 4 pillars of finance. So the 4 pillars of finance would be earning, saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, giving. Those are the 4 buckets, if you will, of your financial life. So someone might be anxious earner, right? They might make a lot of money, but if they spend everything they make on stuff, right, they never save, then they're an avoidant saver. Or you see people who save really frugally, but they never invest because they're scared of the markets, and they don't understand compound interest, and they don't understand the time value of money, which is a really big idea in finance. It's of how your money grows over time exponentially when you invest it. So people are avoiding investing. And then the last bucket, of course, is giving. It's like, all right, so you made this pile and you're sitting on a fortune. What are you doing with it? Is it just for your egoic self-aggrandizement? Or does this store all this stored work energy? What is it for? I guess is kind of the question I've always been wrestling with. Is like, if you don't have any money, then you have no work energy. You have no power to affect change in the world. Can't feed the hungry or clothe the naked or heal the sick without money in your pocket, unless you've mastered the art of multiplying the loaves and fishes, which I certainly haven't. So you're going to need money and that was the thing in the monastery. Like, we had this goodwill and a lot of people we wanted to serve, a lot of good we were hoping to do in the world, but we didn't have the financial resources to do a lot because we were just so disempowered financially, even though our hearts were in the right place. So it's like, okay, how do we bring these two together? How do you align your finances with your values, whatever? I'm not here to tell you what your values are, but like whatever they are, like how do we help use your wealth as a tool for love and service to a suffering world and try to make the world a better place and fix that crack that you feel you were put at the plant to try to fix.
And what about people who are just struggling to make ends meet?
Oh, that's hard. Been there.
It's like, yeah. So
right.
as I have, so
right.
What what kind of what would you say to someone who just it feels like you can never get enough money just to pay your rent and, as I was saying, pay off your credit cards,
right?
And
well,
things
again,
like that.
The problem is there's no one piece of advice because it's a custom job here, right? It's like, well, why are you struggling financially? Is it you're overspending? You're a leaky bucket. Money comes in and just pours out. So maybe it's a savings issue, or maybe it's a capacity. You don't earn enough, right? You're living in an expensive world, and your income doesn't meet your basic needs. So then you're going to have to level up. You're going to have to find some way to develop your skill set so that you have tools or talents or something that the market wants to pay you for so that you can command a higher wage, essentially. So how are you going to, what is that going to look like for you to try to level up your career or your work situation? So developing, basically our modern economy, what it really rewards these days is some kind of intellectual capital. Some sort of capital, or it could be physical labor too, but that tends to be tricky. We used to reward that. Now it's never it's not a good way to go. So what's that intellectual capital that you have, and what are your skill sets? And so it would be really, that's why I do a lot of financial coaching. I work with people and clients who come to me and I was looking for some coaching. Happy to do that. Check me out on my website. But essentially we need to dig into why are you struggling financially? Where is the holes and where, the credit cards? There's so many different reasons why people are struggling financially, and we would really need a specific case scenario to give you more proactive advice. But yeah, I'm not sure I've given you a good answer, but that's the best I can offer.
Well, and as far as physical labor no longer being very viable, I think if you want to be a plumber or an electrician or build houses, that's still going to pay you. That's a good start. It's a great start.
But it's still intellectual capital. Knowing how to fix someone's plumbing requires a certain skill set. So yes, you are working with your hands, but you are bringing a skill set to the table, and that can be very, very, very lucrative, to be sure. But even plumbers are still entrepreneurs. They got to know how to run a business. They got to know how to market. They got to know how to advertise. They got to do customer service. You have to do billing. So there's still a lot going on there that isn't just working with your hands.
Oh yeah, well that's true. That's very true. Unless you're working for another company, and even then there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. People think that they don't want to be a plumber just because it can be gross, but there's a bit more to it.
Yeah, I just rented my house out in Santa Fe. I moved out here to North Carolina, and the guy renting it, he's a contractor. He's an immigrant from Mexico. He started his own construction business, painting and drywall, and he's raking it in. It's like, oh my gosh, dude, some months he's making more than I am. And I'm like, wow, this is great. Good for you. Right on.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You can't, I live in West Coast, and I think I'm pretty much up and down the I-5 corridor. you can't, there's not enough work. There's too much work for anyone in that business. Like it's really hard to find people that will do the work so they can charge kind of whatever they want. Yep. There's like, they'll just, luckily they don't. Luckily they usually are semi-reasonable, but yeah, it's very, very lucrative. It's completely off the subject, but yeah, it's very lucrative. So what are some of the biggest, do you think, roadblocks for people that you find is in taming the money monster?
Okay. Well, so now we're going to have to, it depends on how deep you want to go. But this brings us back to this weird thing called the Enneagram, which that's alluded to in your intro. So Enneagram, it's a big, long, fancy word, but Ennea in Greek means 9 and gram means drawn. So the word Enneagram just means 9 things drawn. And what we're drawing are sort of the 9 archetypes of personality. It's sort of Jungian in its understanding, but what I've really tried to do is ground it in the latest research in neurobiology and childhood developmental psychology. And so what it basically, the Enneagram tells you is think of it like car. Here, I'll use a car metaphor, right? Okay. You drive a unique year, make, and model. Your car is totally unique to you, and you can customize it and trick it out in 1,000 different ways to make it, super specialized to you. And yet, there's still a chassis, a structure to your car, and it fits an archetype car, like it's a SUV, or it's a compact car, or it's a sports car. And same thing with our ego defenses. We all sort of develop an ego defense mechanism in childhood to protect us from the biggest threats in that childhood environment. Oops, sorry, my computer just glitched. No worries. And so basically we have this ego defense structures, and there's only so many ways that they can be designed, just like there's only so many styles of cars you can have. You go too far outside those parameters and it's not a car, it's not roadworthy, right? And same thing with the human ego. And it turns out there's 9 patterns of ego defenses, and there's a reason for it, which we could get into. I'm happy to give you a deep dive on why there's 9. But essentially, once you know what your core personality type is, what that tells you is what your greatest unconscious fear is. It tells you what was that thing in your childhood that's kind of scared you the most, more consistently. And it, I could geek out on this all day, but at the end of the day, once you know your Enneagram type, there's 9, and when you know yours, then it tells you what's that deepest unconscious driver or motivator what your greatest fear is, that your ego is designed to protect you from, that you're always trying to outrun. And then when you layer on top of that, what we talked about earlier, this attachment theory of money, right? Whether you're anxiously attached or fearfully avoidant, then we get 2 money monsters for each of these 9 personality types, for 18 money monsters in total. So really it's figuring out what your Enneagram type is and then figuring out what your attachment style is to money. Then that really is the pattern that I've noticed over and over and over and over again that works really well for diagnosing what your particular issues with money are likely to be.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Enneagrams, and because it seems like with a lot of people who are not successful in, they don't come from a successful family but become very successful. It seems like a lot of their drive is fear. Yeah. They're not always good with money. A lot of times they're not good with money. No. Because success does not mean money. It absolutely doesn't seem to mean the same thing, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah. So,
I've worked with Hollywood celebrities. I've worked with people, CEOs. I've worked with people, the whole spectrum. And people may have a high earning capacity. They may make a lot of money. That doesn't mean they're good with money.
Right. Because we constantly hear stories about the Hollywood celebrity or whoever, or athletes who can't pay their rent, or they've made, and I always look at what they made over time and think,
Yep.
you did
I call it the
that much?
I call it the MC Hammer maneuver. If you
Right.
remember,
Well, there you go. Okay.
remember him? He
Yes.
made like
Yeah. Yeah.
80
Yeah.
million back in the 90s and then went bankrupt. Like, yeah, you made
Yeah.
80 million
Yeah.
dollars and you still went bankrupt. How? Well, you were good at making money, but you weren't good with money, you know.
Yeah. That always just kind of blows my mind.
And
But it's
athletes are the worst, right? Because
right.
they tend to have this really spectacular career for 5, 10, maybe 15 years if they're really lucky, and they have this high earning capacity for a very short period of time, and then it goes away. And now what? And if they were living, you know, if their spending equals their income, then they're done, right? They finish their last season of football, or they lose their last Grand Slam in tennis, and now what? Okay,
Now we're done. And it's
now we're done.
interesting because a lot of athletes seem to be realizing that the best course in college is to take business, is to get
Yeah,
into business classes and understand
100%.
business, because that's what they are. Unfortunately, they're not, you know, as an athlete, professional athlete, now you're a business.
Hmm.
Yeah, more and more people are starting to figure this out.
And a brand. And that's where, yeah.
A
So
brand,
that's why
yeah.
they start into product placements. They start doing other company lines, all these other things to supplement their income while their celebrity can they leverage their celebrity for something else, essentially.
Right, right. Which is now what they're allowing them to do in college, and there's a big bunch of hoopla around it. And um,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I think it's a terrible thing on the other side. On the other side of it, well, the college is making money, and
Right.
all of the other companies that you're watching on television while this game's going on, they're all making money. So why shouldn't the athlete with the brand be able to, make a profit off the brand? Yeah.
You're in the AT&T or Bank of America arena or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
And they're
Yes.
just raking it in, but the people who are actually bringing the people into the stands to put seats in the butts in the chairs, they're not the ones making the money. Why is that fair? I think you should be able to command whatever you command.
Yeah, I
Why?
agree. I mean, the part that's unfair is then for the colleges. It's not fair
Right.
for the colleges struggle because they can't get the talent anymore because they have to have money, and not all
Yeah.
colleges have money, which that's the unfortunate thing about it. But yeah, for the athletes who, with the sport I watch, they are literally throwing their body on they're risking their
Lives.
real harm and life. Yeah, they're risking their lives.
So we
And
said regarding
so,
football, for
geez.
example, or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, traumatic brain injuries all across the
yeah.
board. You're
Oh,
destroying your body
yeah.
for someone else's profit. They should be making as much as they can milk for.
As much as they can make so that they can use that business degree and
Yeah.
then keep going afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think more professional athletes are starting to figure this out. And I mean, a lot of them, I've heard a lot of them talking about, I may only have 5 years in this.
Yeah.
If I'm lucky,
If I'm lucky. Well,
I'll have
my
5 years.
dad was a football
Yeah.
player. He was a college ball player, and
Hmm.
then he blew his knee out in his senior year, and it's like, boop, okay, done. Now
Yeah.
what?
And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And when I watch the college games, I'm thinking I'm rooting for the team, and then occasionally I kind of step back and go, okay, only 10% of these guys will do this again. This is their senior year, unless they're going to play for Canadian League or in their backyard. This is it. There's not going to be another stadium for most of them. So I hope they took the right classes. I hope they got an education. So yeah,
Well, let's dig into the Enneagram a little bit if you're open to it.
absolutely. Yes.
Would you mind if we did a little armchair analysis of you or me, whichever you prefer? We could figure out your
Yeah,
Enneagram type.
let's try it.
All right.
I'm
Okay.
open
So,
to it.
all right, now this is fraught with difficulty,
I'm
and
sure.
and doing this over a Zoom is going to be hit and miss. So I can't.
Oh, okay.
I want to temper expectations, but if we get it right, it's a lot of fun.
I should be a
Um,
millionaire when we're done here, right? We're gonna.
I don't know about that, but maybe we'll understand where some of your money issues may have come from over the years. All right. So the Enneagram, we've got these 9 different types, and we're going to break them into 3. So imagine a color wheel, right? So
Mhm.
we have this big color wheel, infinite variety, and we can break it into some 9 colors, if you will, sort of shades, and there's infinite variety inside each shade, right?
Hmm.
But then we're going to break that down into three, just like three primary colors, like just so you get red, the red, green, blue, right? We're going to or red, yeah. So let's say we got our three primary colors, and the three, the way to understand them, these three triads, if you will,
Hmm.
it goes back to again your childhood. So we might get a little personal here, and so I want to. There's three core negative emotions in all mammals. So the reason that we get these three primary colors, where they come from, it comes from the work of a affective neuroscientist by a guy named Jaak Panksepp. If anybody wants to geek out on that, you can. But basically says that in all mammals in the limbic system, there's three core negative emotions that all mammals have. We've all got them. All of your other negative emotions are basically running off of those circuits. They get stacked in the brain as the brain stem goes up. It gets more complicated. And there's more going on, of course.
Hmm.
But the three core negative emotions are going to be anger, grief, or shame. They're sort of interchangeable. Sort of grief and shame, and then the third one is going to be fear. And so what I want you to do is to think about your darkest emotional moments when life gets really hard for you, and think back to your teens and 20s primarily. This is true now, but as we age, we tend to hopefully gain a little more maturity. But when you have your darkest emotional moments, when things get tough for you, which negative emotion shows up more often for you? Is it more
Anger.
anger?
Anger.
Okay. Grief or fear?
It's something I've seen. I mean, I've seen in myself.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes anger comes from, like, I have no idea where it comes from, but I was a very loud drummer, and that's that's
Okay.
something that I figured out was like, what am I so angry about? Yeah,
Yeah.
because I really,
Drums are a great way
yeah.
to express anger, that's for sure.
They are.
Get that
Yeah.
out, the system. All right. So now we've got 9 types. We've narrowed it down to 3 choices.
Hmm.
Okay. So the question is that anger, now, do you tend to direct that? There's 3 ways you could process that anger as a child. You could either direct it internally, just kind of like giving yourself an emotional wedgie. Right?
Hmm.
You can direct it externally, which is kind of like having a food fight with the world, or you can have both.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
let me explain these 3 types and how they express themselves and see which one feels right.
Okay.
So if you were to direct that anger internally, you become what we call a type 1. Often call them the perfectionist or the improver. So they tend to have this drill instructor in their head that's always kind of telling them to don't be bad, don't be a bad boy, don't be a bad girl, shape up and do it right. So they have a strong inner critic
Hmm.
essentially, and so they drive that anger towards themselves, and that creates their greatest fear of being bad or defective. So they're always trying to be perfect or perfect themselves or perfect the world around them. That's sort of one choice, and I call them the BMW of egos because they're sort of precision engineered, right? But they take a fair bit of maintenance. So that's option 1. Option 2 is we'll jump over to type 8. Type 8 externalizes that anger. We call them the challenger. I call them the Humvee of egos because they tend to have they kind of sneak in. They like a good fight or a good challenge. They tend to push against the boundaries of reality around them. So that's why I call them the Hummer. So they're kind of steamroll over obstacles in front of them, but they tend not to be very fuel efficient with their opinions. So so that's the challenger. And then in between the 8 and the 1, we've got type 9. They're sort of trapped between the two. So they've got this internalized anger kind of at themselves for not being able to really meet their needs in childhood, but they've got this externalized anger at the world for not meeting them either. So it's kind of like this volcano inside them they never want to touch. And so they like their environment very peaceful. We call them the peacemaker.
Hmm.
I call them the RV of egos because they don't like conflict because they're sort of afraid that their greatest fear for a 9 is a loss of wholeness. Like if the Hulk of anger ever comes out, they're afraid it's going to rip them or their world apart. So they kind of go with the flow, really easy going because they just don't want to. They don't want the conflict. And let me jump back to the 8. I left something out. So the greatest fear for the 8 is they fear being harmed or controlled. So they just don't want to. They want to eights love to be in control. Whereas nines are tend to let go of control pretty easily, and then ones are always trying to perfect everything around them. So, do any of those even feel remotely?
I would be I think an 8 plus.
Mm-hmm.
I literally drove a show-offy car when I was a teenager and into my early 20s. So
Yeah.
the car analogy kind
An
of
eight
made
plus.
an 8.
What is the
Well, the
plus?
plus could because also, and I also am combine. I think I have a combination of the two. Um, and now in my current life, I like a lot of quiet. I like
Yeah.
quiet more than when I was younger. But when I was younger, I definitely, I had a lot of anger that was not expressed. I was not so much a perfectionist. Um, there were some other things about the 8 that just seemed to ring true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't. So the eight doesn't like to be controlled. They're
That
always
was it.
fighting for
Yeah.
control. They want to be
Hmm.
in control and kind of be in. And so you can there's a thing called
I
there's a thing called
literally
wing.
I literally raced cars. So that's kind of about that competition is about
You liked
controlling
intense,
other. If you want to be
right?
the fastest, you want to be the best, right?
So
Yeah.
the way that another hallmark of the eight is they love intensity.
Hmm.
They sort of like intense things,
Yeah.
and so that's their.
I never learned to ride a motorcycle because I just like speed too much. I literally thought this would be a bad idea. Going fast without any protection. It does not sound like the right thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can be what's called an eight wing nine. Like you can have
Hmm.
these wing, like you can be.
Oh,
So
I
if you think
see.
of it as a color wheel, right? You could have your color could be a little closer to the nine, or
Hmm.
you can grow as you mature. And as we age, hopefully there's a whole. So the nice thing about the Enneagram is it's not a static model. It's got a
Right.
growth model built into it. And so we're talking about your shadow structure, so the darker parts of your personality, but then there's also the higher parts, which we can get into, if we have time.
Hmm.
But essentially, yeah, that makes sense that you're as you age, hopefully these traits mellow, and you aren't maybe driven the same way you were when you were younger. But okay, so let's play with the eight. Let's assume that's your type. You could also be
Okay.
an eight wing seven, which would be another. You could be closer to the seven side, but it sounds like you're more to the nine. Then the money monsters for the eight. So we've got these two unhealthy ways. I call them the detonator and the dominator. So the detonator is the eight who hates being controlled by money. So they tend to detonate their budget. They tend to detonate prudent financial limitations that are put upon them. They just blow through them, maybe racking up a lot of credit cards, maybe grabbing the check at a restaurant because they want to feel important, or having the fancy car, even though maybe it's not the most financially prudent thing to be doing, because you don't want to be controlled by money, and so you tend to maybe just disregard what would be more prudent restraints. Or on the flip side, you can be what's called the dominator, and that would be sort of like, I mean, Donald Trump's a good example, right? Not to get political, I'm not putting him down or up. I'm just saying he's a good example of a dominator eight. Like, there you go, right?
Hmm.
Or the show Succession or Billions, right? Those are sort of dominator eights. Like they want the power, they want the control, and so then money becomes the thing that allows them to have that.
It's so interesting. Both with Billions and Succession, I love watching it just to see when they're going to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's what I get out of it. I mean, beside the fact that they're brilliantly produced shows, but yeah, I'm always just there to see if they fail or how they fail, or
and so that's the thing about the Enneagram, which is so cool, is like what's weird about it is that the thing that you're trying to outrun, the fear you're trying to avoid, it's like you end up redlining, you end up racing so far away from it that the desire to avoid that fear is what creates the most suffering in your life. That eventually crashes your car and causes that fear to actually manifest, because it's the thing you're trying to outrun, but you run so hard, right? You end up in a multi-car pileup. So you might hate dealing with money and not want to deal with the limitations of it. So you rack up the credit card debt because you don't want to be controlled by the limitations you're under. But
Hmm.
then that creates this huge crisis of limitation that then, of course, creates the very problem you were trying to avoid.
Right. Yeah, that all rings true. I do hate dealing with money.
Yeah,
I am more secure than I used to be,
yeah,
so it's easier. It's
yeah,
much easier now, and like I'm very thankful that I can pay bills and things like that. But I have to, I guess I have to temper myself and not spend it all.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, like I literally want to move to a very expensive area of the world, but it's like, well, then I would run out of money in 10 years, and that's probably not a good idea. It would be
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, so
yeah.
I don't know. So I don't know if framing helps at all, or if it feels like we've diagnosed a little bit of your money monster issues or not.
It sounds very familiar, I guess. I think that, yeah, it sounds
Yeah,
pretty familiar. Yeah.
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 And there's a whole ego structure. So like I'm just touching the so do you know what a fractal is in geometry?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's this really complicated geometric shape pattern. But if you look at the mathematics behind a fractal, it's super simple. It's a super simple algorithm. But then when you repeat it over, it creates this infinite complexity. And that's what's interesting about the Enneagram. It's kind of like this fractal. So we're touching the top layer of the fractal here, but it has all these cool layers and layers and layers and layers that we can get into. But there's a whole ego structure then for each of the 9 types. And so there's a whole ego structure for the 9, which we've just is probably 24 parts to it. And we've just touched on the first 1 or 2. But we really go into like, what is it that if that is your type, which I'm, again, armchair analysis is always a little fraught, difficult, but
Right.
it sounds like
Right.
we may have hit on it. I'm just looking at my map. So yeah, I can walk you through your whole ego map if you wanted to, but that might be another show.
Um, well, let's start. Let's do some of it.
All
Can we
right.
do
Well,
part
let's
of it? Yeah.
part of it. So for those who are this is a very visual thing. I'm trying to express a picture
Oh,
in
it
words,
is. Okay.
but I'll walk you through it. It's
Hmm.
just think of you can imagine 2 traffic cones stuck together. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the ego structure. So you're starting at the bottom of the 2 cones at birth, then your ego grows kind of in we call it the first half of life. So you're kind of moving up this bottom of the first cone, and then you kind of hit sort of midlife, or you hit tragedy essentially, and then your ego kind of hits the certain limitations, and then hopefully if you mature, then you move into what we call the second half of life, into more spiritual wholeness and compassion and fulfillment. So you're kind of moving up to the peak of this double cone. So that's kind of the shape of the structure we're talking about here. But if we're let's just talk about the bottom half, the first half of life for now, and see how far we get. But for the 8, like we call it we call it your sacred wound. So the sacred wound for the 8 is that externalized anger. So it's kind of how so 8s have a real hard time with injustice or betrayal. Usually there were some real betrayals in childhood that happened for them, that made them feel this real sense of injustice at the world. So they're kind of angry a little bit at the world around them. Does that feel like it connects with you at all?
I'm never quite sure. I'm always kind of looking for that in my
Uh-huh.
history.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I'm not completely plugged in with where the anger comes from, I guess.
Huh.
I'm not entirely sure.
But there was
It's
somehow, because a lot of
something.
it happens before so the thing is a lot of it happens before your consciousness develops.
Hmm.
So the weird thing about it, is that it's what allowed you to have self-consciousness in the first place. And by that, what I mean, again, this is going to geek out a little bit, but um, so if we're at the bottom of this double cone, right? You're starting your journey in the womb, and you're starting from a place of what I would call unconscious unity. So you're kind of in unity with your environment in the womb, but you're unconscious of it, right? Because you don't have any sense of I, thou, or subject, object, or whatever.
Right,
And then you
right.
and then you get born, and you get this physical umbilical cord that gets cut. But then there's this what I call a psychological umbilical cord that forms between you and your caregivers. And it creates a sort of egoic codependence on your caregivers to do the driving for you of your ego for the first 5 to 10 years of your life, right? But that egoic codependence has to get cut in order for you to develop what I'm calling conscious separation, for you to have, and this is some big terms psychologically, but it allows you to individuate and differentiate and develop, your own ego structure as a young adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the 8, that we come that externalized anger, it's basically kind of how you got the nose of life came at you when you were a kid. Like, no, don't touch the hot stove, or no, don't kick the dog, or don't bite your sister, or don't throw your food on the floor. Like, these no's had to be backed up with a certain kind of emotional force. And for a few, it probably came through anger of some sort, or there were some major betrayals or hurts, some injustices of some sort that cut that psychological umbilical cord and allow you to develop. So it's a sacred wound. It's a necessary wound that we all have to have. Just the flavor of it changes depending on our Enneagram type. And so for the 8, it's that externalized anger. But then that, as I said before, creates your greatest fear of being harmed or controlled. And then each type has a greatest vice, or like a worst. We used to call them the 7 deadly sins. Not to get too theological. Sin is a triggering word for a lot of people, so I don't use it too much. But sin, what it really means is to miss the mark. It's an archery term. It means when you miss the mark, it says this is how you're most likely to kind of mess up in life. And so for an 8, we say your greatest vice is lust. And it doesn't just mean sexual. It means like this lust for intensity. Like, you want the speed, you want the thrill, you want to feel alive. It's this, and so you feel alive when you're pushing against reality. And that's kind of why we call you the challenger. It's like when you enjoy slamming under the drums, even though it feels right.
Yeah, it's a very good feeling.
It's a very good feeling.
Yeah.
And so then we say what your primary, you have an ego addiction for an 8. So we're sort of moving up the bottom half of this double cone.
And this makes a lot of sense.
Right. So the primary ego addiction for an 8, we say, is vengeance, which isn't necessarily mean you're always getting revenge. It's just you're always got to get your way. It's that that love of the fight, essentially. If that tracks for you, when someone pushes on you, you've got to push back, and so it's that always pushing is what we mean by vengeance.
I think that was more true when I was younger, but it's probably still true. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, so there's a natural. I don't know if it's natural. There's a tendency when you're the youngest to, have to assert yourself more, feel like you have to assert yourself more. Right. The other side of that is you get away with everything because the parents have already gone through it.
but you also probably got picked on a lot too. You probably got dumped, as they say, excuse my language, the shit rolls downhill, right?
Yeah.
And so you probably were at the bottom of the pile. Yeah. And it just kind of came on top of you all the time. And so you've got all these brothers picking on you all the time. So you probably had to fight in order to not just get bullied constantly.
Well, my brother was 6 years older than me, so it was he picked on me. Not it was kind of a family dynamic, not just with my brother, but my cousins. I have a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, and we were always kind of giving each other a hard time. And a brother and 2 sisters. So it definitely feels like you're getting picked on all the time. And because when you're really young, it's because they don't want to hang out with you. Yeah. And with my brother, he would never want to hang out with me until very, later in life. So felt like getting picked on. Sure.
All right. So then what happens with the 8? So you have this primary ego addiction is the vengeance, is that pushing back, right? Mm-hmm. But then you have a secondary ego addiction. So what happens? Think of it like when you overdose on a stimulant, you can take a depressant, or vice versa. Like if you, this is a bad, and I don't know this from experience. I'm just saying. I'm told that if you drink too much alcohol, you can then take cocaine, and that undoes the alcohol. Right? You've done the stimulant, depressant.
That was never my experience. I mean, yeah, sure. I'm right. Imagine. I can only
imagine. Or I'm trying to think or like taking caffeine, right? To undo the alcohol. Sometimes you can drink more alcohol when you take a couple shots of espresso. Okay, maybe the metaphors are, you get the point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have a secondary ego addiction. It's also maladaptive, but like when you overdose on the primary ego addiction, you jump to a secondary. And so for the eight, your secondary ego addiction, we say stinginess. It's a kind of or what we call rigid withdrawal. Like
Hmm.
you when the attack. So with eights, we often say that for eights, the best defense is a good offense. So you kind of on the offense a lot, but that can create all kinds of problems. And so when you encounter a situation where that kind of assertiveness either isn't going to work or doesn't work or gets you in trouble, then you kind of fall back to this stinginess, this sort of pulling your armor in around you to kind of protect yourself, in a kind of rigid withdrawal that you can go into as an adaptive response when you've overdone it, perhaps on the vengeance side. Let's see if there's that track for you.
Um, sort of, sort of. I mean, I definitely feel myself wanting to withdraw with some at some points. Yeah, I'm I'm finding out as I age that what's the word? I'm very outgoing on the outside, but then I'm also appreciate a lot of alone time. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So so eights have a hard time letting their tender side out a little bit.
Hmm.
It's a defense of like protect this. Eights have is really actually this warm, gooey center. Tend to be very warm in the inside, but they have a hard time expressing it, maybe perhaps sometimes on the outside. Um, but that's basically the core shadow structure. It's the bottom half of this double cone we just talked about for the eight. And then there's the money monsters, which we already discovered. You got the detonator and the dominator. But then what happens is, of course, as you go through life, then your ego gets beat up by the vicissitudes of life. Usually you hit a midlife crisis, or you know, tragedy happens, and we tend to overdose on these ego addictions to the point where they're causing suffering, that the very suffering we were trying to avoid. And then hopefully our egos then soften and we mature into the second half of life. And so for then there's like, just like you've got these you have a greatest vice and these ego addictions, there's a similar parallel structure for your enlightenment, or your we've moved from the bottom of that double cone, from, as we mentioned in birth, from unconscious unity, moving up the cone to conscious separation. And now we're moving to the peak, which would be conscious unity, which would be kind of the goal of our spiritual traditions across our faiths. It's like, how do we reach kind of conscious unity with life? And so we're living in that higher space. So for the eight to get there, the primary recovery virtue for eight is mercy. So when eights are healthy, they really have this really strong sense of mercy, and also a strong sense of justice. Like they're very warm and can be very compassionate and kind. And that's kind of their first step to real spiritual growth, is having that mercy for themselves and for others, so they don't feel the need to push all the time. They can kind of let things be. And it sounds like you've already maybe experienced that to a large extent.
I'm definitely coming more and more into that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like letting go is a big goal of mine. I guess I'll just put it as a goal. It doesn't, but that's what when I meditate, that's what I do. Is I mainly just let go of things and
Yeah.
try to observe the world from
Yeah.
a non-judgmental point of view. So, yeah, that's what I work towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've got, so that once you can sort of lean in, maybe think about just tweaking that a little bit. Think of it as mercy. It's a letting go, but it's a merciful letting go. Like you're not just letting it go, but you're letting go with a certain grace of, I'm 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 letting it be, but I'm also allowing in a kind of graceful way. And then the next step, because you got two ego addictions, so then you got two recovery virtues. So mercy is the first step, and then the second one is honesty, which is, and what that means is isn't so much like pointing out other people's flaws or pushing back. It's like being honest about what's inside of you, letting that warm, kind center come out, that gooey center that's there, to kind of let the armor down a little bit and be more vulnerable and show up with a little more honest authenticity. And when those two virtues combine, when you combine mercy with honesty, you get the highest virtue for the type 8, which is innocence. It's kind of it's that innocent acceptance of life from a place that doesn't need that intense. It's sort of the cure for that lust, that cure for that need for incredible intensity all the time, and being able to just be with what is in a kind of honest, open, loving acceptance. And that, I'll just wrap it up. So we're kind of moving up the second half of life, the top of the double cone, just to wrap it out. And then the greatest hope for a type 8 is to experience complete freedom from harm and control. So when they can accept life with a kind of accepting innocence, it's like nothing can harm you because you're not buffeted by it. It's not controlling you. You're controlling your response to it. So it gives you this internal freedom. That doesn't mean life doesn't suck sometimes. It doesn't mean that life doesn't throw curveballs at you, but you're maintaining this inner freedom and control without needing to maintain this sort of external rigid control. Lastly, the greatest gift for an 8 really is what I call divine justice. They really stop standing up for themselves and my own like ego, but standing up for other people. Like, so Martin Luther King Jr. is a great example of a type 8, of a very healthy type 8, right? Or Mother Teresa of Calcutta is a good example of a type 8. Like, they have this innocent, honest, loving stance towards the world that is really about bringing justice for others, not just needing to, fight their own personal battles.
Oh, right.
So does that track for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty helpful actually. And how does it relate to money matters?
Right. And so then there's the money monsters, as we talked about, were the detonator and the dominator.
Mm-hmm.
But then the money master for the 8 is what I call the dynamo. So now you have all this you still have all this power, right? But now you have all this stored work energy, right? You have all this capital, you have these resources at your disposal, and now you can deploy them in service of others. So your sacred gift is divine justice, is bringing justice more fully into the world. And now you've got the tools and resources to do that. Just like Martin Luther King Jr., just like Mother Teresa, they manage millions of dollars. Mother Teresa may not have taken any money for herself, but she certainly had many, many millions flowing through her charity at any given time, and took a tremendous amount of resources to fund the civil rights movement. So it's about having this dynamic power along with this capacity with money that you have at your disposal to deploy it in service of a suffering world.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That is really great. So you wrote a book about that, you say?
I wrote a book. and then that's just one of the 9 types,
that's just
right?
One.
So we could go through all the 9 types. Each one has its own path. Each one has its own ego structure. Each one's got its own money monsters. So circling back to your question is like, what do people need to know? Like, what are the common mistakes? Well, it just depends. What's your type? This is where it's so helpful to know, what is my Enneagram type? What are my unique pitfalls I'm likely to run into with money? And then how do I move forward from them?
And another question that this is actually a question from the beginning of the podcast, but you talked about when you first realized you needed to maybe help the monastery and figure out money matters. So do you have any favorite books that you read, or
yeah,
are there any like
I think
Ones that
that
really had an impact more than others, maybe.
oh, well, it's not really a personal finance book. It's more of a macroeconomic book.
Oh,
It's called
yeah.
Naked Economics by Charles Wieland.
Hmm.
And I just love that book because it gave me a good, I'm a macro level thinker, obviously. Like I think, it helped me understand the beauty and power and um, fundamental goodness of a free market capitalistic system. Like what's good about it? Now, obviously there's problems,
That's my question lately.
but it's like we often say it's the best of bad alternatives, right? It's like when you see what the other options are, you see, okay, you see how much good it does overall compared to, let's say, communism or even, a kind of crazy socialism. Like look at Venezuela, look at Russia. Like
Well, it's
how are these
interesting
countries
because
doing?
everyone mentions these
Mhm,
other systems that are happening right now.
mhm.
Um, and I include capitalism in this. I wonder what we know about it because all of the examples today are really corrupt.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but that's the
would they
problem
work
is,
if they weren't?
well,
Would they work better if they weren't so corrupt?
I think this is what the lesson is, that is there's no matter how idealistic they start off in a socialistic or communistic endeavor, they inevitably deteriorate because of the way that power corrupt. Because
Hmm.
inevitably it, it becomes, in order to um, impose that kind of egalitarian system, right? Then it requires a tremendous amount of force and rule of law. So it inevitably devolves into a kind of totalitarianism. It has to. And then once you concentrate that much power at the top of the system, it inevitably becomes corrupted. And then the whole system is designed to serve just the people at the top, and everyone at the bottom suffers horribly. It's just the nature of the beast. There's
Hmm.
really no other way to do it. When you give that much power to any government,
But this is
it
how I see capitalism working as well. And I don't just
okay.
mean today. I mean, when I was a teenager, I thought, well, if this system is based on making more money,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
You have to grow. In other words, you have to get more people and more product. When I was a little kid, not a little kid, when I was in high school and I had hippie teachers, I thought to myself, how does they, how do you do this without destroying everything eventually? And there's a great book
right.
called Natural Capitalism that kind of answers that question. But yeah, what it's, I
Well,
know
do you
this is
remember?
off the subject, but
Oh, sure. I mean,
yeah,
it's yeah, we're getting into sort of macroeconomic
yeah,
economics here,
which
but
is
which is
interesting to
great,
me.
which is
Really,
fascinating to me too.
yeah.
And I won't claim to be the end all be all expert on on this particular subject, but I would say that capitalism's problem is externalities. It's all the pollution and all of the side effects that come from a product or service that isn't baked into the price of that product or service. So like gasoline, right?
Right,
People are making
right.
money off of it, but they're not. No one's paying for the pollution and the environment, the damage it's doing to the environment. So you need a strong government to regulate externalities. And when that system gets corrupted, it's obviously going to be deeply problematic. But the it's at least there is, that's where you want a good government. Good governance is like, and I'm not saying we have a great governance, but in theory, that's what the government's job is to do, is to be the referee of the playing field, to make sure that the playing field is fair. Then when you get into crony capitalism, where the state becomes completely beholden to particular markets or sectors or power players, then you basically have a referee who's calling it all for one side, one team, or not the other, and the system can break down and become corrupted and can become unfair, and that's definitely a problem. And we see plenty of that in our current system.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation of
Right.
the problems in my eyes, that what I'm seeing. And I've always thought that, what if, government wasn't motivated so much by ego, because it does seem to be motivated by ego, and there's a large, or seems to be, maybe it's not. There seems to be a large section of the populace who think we don't need government. I don't know if that's actually propaganda or if that's true, but I've always thought, yeah, if people were practicing capitalism with integrity, we would need very little government, right? Very little.
Well, I would argue you're always going to be it's always going to be a problem. You're always going to need a referee on the football field.
Sure.
Imagine if you didn't have good referees, what would the game devolve? It'd devolve into a bar brawl you know what I mean?
I do. I just saw 2 playoff games of football yesterday. Both of them nearly did.
Right. So that's what you want the government there, is to keep the whole thing from turning into a Machiavellian, cage fight.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's, again, you've got problems in capitalism. I'm not saying they aren't very real. It's just that those problems are easier to mitigate and manage than the problem of having a totalitarian system that becomes completely oppressive of free will, entrepreneurship, and the right for people to self-determine their future. So in a good capitalistic system, right, you have minimal government. You have the minimum necessary force. You want the referees to be as minimally invasive as possible, but yet still doing their job, right? And so it's again very complicated to solve these problems, but it's a better problem to have on the free market side than the problems of look at what happened in Nazi Germany, look what happened in Stalinist Russia, look what happened in Cambodia with Pol Pot, look what's happening in China. Like, we don't have any good example. We have no examples where communism has worked, because it always seems to deteriorate into this kind of hellish nightmare for the people living under it.
Well, and I guess that's what's strange. I hope we're just going through a stage personally, but we seem to be wanting to prove how capitalism doesn't work. But and it's not. This has been for many years now. It's not like it's just happening. It's not like it just started. But
it's easier. It's easier to fix the referees than it is to fix the game itself.
Right. So, and I really appreciate that explanation. I think it's kind of making more sense to me.
Right.
And we need, everyone only. It seems like people only look at the main referees, and not so much at the small referees that you have everywhere, because that's important too. It's kind of it's hard to whatever system you use to govern so many people. I think it's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. At some point, the system does break down. I mean, and all societies and all civilizations go through cycles of prosperity and collapse. The Roman Empire went through it. We're going through it. The cycles of civilization are somewhat independent of the cycles of we could say we're late stage capitalism. There's all these different ways of looking at it, but essentially, is it capitalism's fault, or is it the natural deterioration of an empire over time?
And that's a really interesting point as well. And then I can't remember, somewhere someone mentioned that, well, wait a minute, the Roman Empire lasted a long time.
Yeah.
It did not fall apart in 200 years or 250 years. It worked for a long time. I mean, it wasn't a very good system, but it's not like it fell apart immediately. But it is, again, we are still in this 250 years, I'm saying, is a short time. Yeah. We're still kind of at the beginning of this experiment that a handful of people started 250 years ago. And it's really interesting. And something I learned watching the 1776 documentary by Ken Burns is how long it took. Like, we all think, they wrote the Constitution in 1776 and boom! It's like, nope, that's not what happened.
Not at all. No, it was a dogfight. There was fistfights and stabbings and on the floor of the Senate, and I forgot who it was, but there's Hamilton and Burr and all the fights that were going on there. So
it
was not easy. It was a very messy process. between the Federalists and the Republicans and the whole bit. So,
And it became, I mean, it broke into what is actually, I didn't think about it till I saw this documentary, how that was a civil war.
yeah,
Because the people on the side of England were the same, were from the same place. The people on the side of what's now the U.S. that didn't exist at that time,
yep.
they were thought of as, heretics. They were thought of as
But they had this,
guerrilla fighters.
yeah, but
They were
they had
guerrilla
this,
fighters.
they were,
Yeah.
that's the only way they could fight. Of course they were
Yeah.
guerrilla fighters. What else are they going to do? They're not going to just, stand up. Let's just put all of our troops in front of all of your troops and see what happens. We know where that goes.
Right. Because you have more.
And by a lot, and you got better weapons. And
Yeah.
but that's why the redcoats were so easy to it's made guerrilla warfare pretty easy when the British were all wearing red.
All wearing red and sure that there was no way this band of idiots could do anything against us. I thought that part was interesting. It was like most of the leaders of England, those that were 2 months away and those that were on the ground, just thought there's no possibility these people can win against us. And I think that helped,
Hubris.
Pretty nuts.
But they had a great idea, right? That people should, I mean, at the end of the day, and maybe that's the again, not, we could talk about the evils of capitalism all day. I mean, I'm not going to defend the abuses, the injustices, the externalities, the corruption. It would be, but at the fundamental core is the right of self-determination. It's like both with your government and with your money. It's like you get to determine how you want to make your living. You get to determine how you want to spend your money, and that's a better option to leave everyone free to make their own free choices with how they're going to live their lives and build their financial lives. And you're going to get disparities of income, which is inevitable in every society. There's going to be all kinds of problems of income inequality. It seems to be, and this is not my point. Other people have pointed it out many times, is that income inequality does seem to go up over time in civilizations, regardless of what you do. And yet it's still, this is a healthier choice by far than having a top-down system where everything is controlled for you and you have no choice.
It was also interesting to me to learn that this was absolutely new idea.
Yeah.
Because now it's all over the world. Like there's different people practicing the same things that is practiced in the U.S. or trying to be. And no one had ever done this. No one have ever thought about giving their people some rights. Like, you're going to do what? What?
And our founding fathers get a lot of bad raps for like not extending those rights to all groups of people, including women and minorities and people of color and slavery, and all of that's real. And they were the first ones to actually posit the idea that we're all created equal. And it took us 200 years to actually manifest that. And it wasn't until the Voting Acts, right? Was it the 50s or 70s? Really?
I thought it was the 60s, but it's somewhere
60s.
Between the 50s and the 70s. And women couldn't even have a checking account till the 70s.
Right. Yeah, it took us a while to really.
My mom couldn't have a checking account. I did not know that growing up. It's just so wow.
Not trying to undermine or ignore all of those injustices, and yet this was a pretty revolutionary idea, and we're still trying to live that, manifest that the full reality of that vision and that dream, which is a beautiful one.
It is a beautiful dream, and it's kind of interesting that some of those changes didn't take all that long. I mean, within 100 years, they were freeing slaves, which, that was a new idea. And then
pretty big idea.
Yeah. And then
considering that slavery had been the norm of every civilization for the history of human societies, it's like,
and still is in some societies.
Go
to India. That gets ignored too.
Go to India and look at the caste system. It's not pretty. Go to Japan. They're incredibly racist society. We don't talk about it that much, but look how Japan treated the Koreans, South Koreans in World War II. Jesus. Or where was it? Or Rape in Nanking, how they treated the Chinese in World War II, and how they treat the Koreans today. It's like, this is not. What was it? Who was that wrote that great book called Caste? Isabella Wilkerson. I think I'm getting that right. It's a wonderful book. You should check it out. Called Caste. It's like basically about how the caste system is something that's been endemic of every society and every civilization, and it's a problem. But where we seem to be at least addressing it in the West more readily than other cultures have done.
Right, right. I find it. I mean, you were talking about great books. I find it really interesting that on TikTok, I look at TikTok. Well, I started looking at it because there were people on my podcast that had a TikTok account, so I went on there. There's a lot of sort of revolutionary folks on there, which surprised me. But another thing that blows my mind is there are a fair amount of people holding up Howard Zinn's People History of the United States and saying everyone needs to read this. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I'm glad that people are recommending that to younger people, and that it's like still something out there. It's a very depressing book, but it's sure worth reading.
It is. It's a great one.
Yeah,
it's
extremely educational. It's as thick as almost as thick as a Bible. It's a textbook basically, but yeah. I got
the real
through
history,
most of
like
it.
what was it like for the average person really like?
Right.
Not just the kings and the queens and the rulers and the powerful, which is how our history books seem to be written from that perspective. Which is just like, I mean, that was a real revolution. Like most everything I learned in every history book as a kid was just wrong.
It's pretty amazing. It's true, and that's why that's what's unfortunate about there's kind of a push towards education now, and it's easy to do that because you can say that they're teaching all the wrong things. Well, true, but it's still pretty important to have education. Change it,
yes,
change what they're teaching.
Improve it.
Don't get rid of it. Improve it. Yeah.
Improve it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. Right? Everyone can't be a plumber. And actually, plumbers need to get through they need a high school education in order to get there, because you got to go math. Got to know math. And even physics. You have to know about, what's it called? Water moving through a pipe.
Water pressure. Yeah.
Pressure, which is physics, and the Bernoulli principle, and all kinds of things.
And torque and all things. Working over the wrench. Yeah.
Well, and gases. You got to know about gases. It's very dangerous.
You're a plumber hooking up a gas line. You better understand how flammable, how things are combustible.
Right.
So.
Right. Wow. Well, we are completely off track now, but
but we're having fun.
We are having fun, which is always my goal.
We're talking about the Enneagram, I could geek out in the history of the Enneagram. It's pretty cool too. If you ever want to, I don't know what your timeline is like.
Well, how long does that take? Yeah, let me because I started to research it a little bit, but I'd love to hear it from your point of view, the history of it, like where it comes from. The history of the Enneagram
is really interesting because it's really the history of civilization, right? It goes back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, and so you can find traces of the Enneagram in almost every culture, and every civilization. So when we try to figure out who invented it, it's like trying to figure out who discovered 1 + 1 = 2. But it really didn't get codified into its modern form until the 20th century. It was two pioneers, a guy named Claudio Naranjo and Oscar Ichazo. One's a Chilean and one a Bolivian. Chilean psychiatrist and Bolivian philosopher. And they basically came up with it in the, around 50s to 70s is where they really sort of did most of their pioneering work. And both of them were really very much in the psychedelic movement. That's just kind of a curiosity. Claudio Naranjo is really the godfather of the Enneagram. He was this psychiatrist, MD. He had a psychedelic assisted therapy clinic down in South America.
What did they use? I'm sorry, there's a squirrel running by. I got distracted.
No worries.
What psychedelics were they using?
All of them. So Claudio Naranjo was the first person to document ibogaine effect as a Westerner, and he was working with iboga or ibogaine. He's working with ayahuasca. He worked with MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, the 5-MeO DMT. I don't know if he ever worked with NN-DMT, but he worked with the whole gambit of substances. He was very good friends with a guy named Alexander Shulgin, if that name means anything. So Alexander Shulgin was a chemist in the Berkeley area, working up through the, he was the 50s, 60s, 70s, all those years. and he was the one who first synthesized MDMA. And so
Wow.
Alexander Shulgin and his wife Sasha, they were basically, Shulgin was a chemist, and he made, I forgot exactly how he made his money, Sandoz Labs, I believe it was. And he had enough patents that he just built his own lab at home, and then started coming up. He invented about 100 novel psychoactive compounds. And then what he would do is craft them in his lab and then send them down to South America, where Claudio Naranjo would then test them on his patients, to see how, well, after they would test it, make sure they were safe. And then they would send them down and see how they would work with psychedelics as a therapy. And so,
okay, but so I got to ask, how did they test them?
I don't know. I tested on themselves first and foremost.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
I know they wouldn't give things to people that they hadn't tried themselves.
Interesting.
And I don't know exactly what their safety protocols were like, but apparently they didn't kill anybody, so I guess they did it right. So I wouldn't know exactly all the fine print on that one. But what's so interesting about the Enneagram is that you had all these consciousness explorers, people who were basically exploring the nature of consciousness, also developing the Enneagram alongside, side by side with what we now would think is the psychedelic renaissance that we're in. So Claudio Naranjo, again, he's really the big name. Well, there's Chazo and Naranjo, the two big names. They're sort of the Galileo and Newton of the Enneagram, and they both had important contributions. But Naranjo was the heavy hitter for a number of reasons, because he was the one who really wedded it to modern psychology that we know it to be the useful tool it is today. But he also started the modern psychedelic renaissance too. He inspired a guy named Rick Doblin, who was the founder of MAPS, which is MAPS is, for those of you who don't know, is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Sciences, which is the largest nonprofit for psychedelic research right now in the world. And they're the ones running the phase 2 trials for MDMA for PTSD, and they run a bunch of very important clinical work. But anyway, the important part is that the guy who founded MAPS is a guy named Rick Doblin, and Rick Doblin got inspired by Claudio Naranjo, who wrote a book called My Healing Journey, which really documented his work with all these different psychoactive compounds down in South America. And Rick Doblin actually wrote the foreword he reprinted that book under the printing press of MAPS, essentially, to make sure it wouldn't go out of print. So we can trace both the modern psychedelic movement and the modern Enneagram both back to Naranjo and also Ichazo for their work that they did, which was interesting, because it's sort of like in a way it gives credibility to the Enneagram in my opinion, because they were really seeing how people's egos were dissolving and reforming, in very short spaces of time with these different compounds, and then noticing the patterns and saying, okay, well, and essentially that's where we get the Enneagram that it is today.
It still seems so sad to me that we lost so much research into psychedelics from them being outlawed for so long in the United States, and there was still research going on, but no one. It's just a bizarre story. The whole kind of history of psychedelics in the U.S. is very bizarre, especially with mushrooms. Like it makes about as much sense as the marijuana being outlawed. With just
and when
bizarre,
they were doing the work, they weren't illegal when they were doing this work.
Right.
Before these were illegal, right. So it was all legal. But to put restrictions on them, understandable. But to put them in the same Schedule 1 category as heroin, which means they have no legitimate scientific or research or therapeutic value, meaning that we've shut off the ability for clinicians and researchers to study the healing properties of these, is outrageous.
Completely, and we lost 50 years of research that we could have been so far down the road now. I mean, they're finding out things now, mainly by what's the word? Mainly by just showing people how it works, but still needs because the research doesn't exist.
But so where I'm at right now, I'm living in a pretty conservative part of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right near a couple big military bases. But the fascination with psychedelics among the military space is huge because there's so many combat veterans coming back with PTSD and terribly crippling mental illnesses that these medicines, when used legally, when used safely, when used in an appropriate set and setting, have been proven to be efficacious in helping people with PTSD. And I think we need to, which is why there's now bipartisan support in Congress, but between Republicans and Democrats for more research around these things, because they really are the best treatment we have for our first responders and our men and women in service to be able to help them overcome the horrible things that they've seen and witnessed. So it's coming full circle, and it's really interesting that a lot of the important movement is coming from a traditionally more conservative viewpoint.
Right. It's really interesting, and yeah, and it's being people are realizing how it works, and it's not, if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, using microdoses basically of psilocybins with counseling. That's the big thing. It's not like you just give somebody psychedelics and say, yeah, you should be better soon. It's very intense counseling that is using psilocybins to help. But it's very sad that it's taken this. It's great that it's happening now, but what did we miss? How much time have we missed? This probably could have been used as effectively with Vietnam era veterans. I know they used them. I knew those veterans.
Yes.
They didn't have any counseling.
Well, that's the problem. You can't just do them. You can't just dose yourself with anything.
No, that's maybe not the best idea, especially if you have
actually
PTSD.
Quite dangerous. So we want to caution people against.
Yeah.
We're not talking about recreational use here. We're talking about you working with a licensed therapist in a safe therapeutic setting. Then they can be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, I did enough self-experimenting in my youth that it was never dangerous, but I was also doing far smaller amounts than some people. I was amazed, like when I read The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, I believe was the book about kind of the beginning of people spreading that around the U.S. for recreational purposes, and the amounts they were experimenting with, absolutely nuts.
Yeah, gotta be careful.
Some people did not come back. They were stuck there.
And we should also just put in all the legal disclaimers here, and also there's, if you've got bipolar or schizophrenia or histories of abuse, of substance abuse, there's a lot of reasons why these would never be appropriate for certain people, but for those for whom it's medically and psychologically safe to do so, the clinical research is pretty compelling.
It's pretty compelling, and it's, like I say, it's great that it's going on now. And we should probably wrap it up now. We've been talking for a minute.
Yes. It was an enjoyable conversation, and we went all over the place.
We went all over the place, but we did get deep into some of the subjects on your book. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. It's been fantastic. So let me just say, this has been, were you still talking? This is Joel Albrecht and Doug Lynam, and we have been talking largely about his books, which if you watch the YouTube video, you can see his beautiful display behind him. Taming the Money Monster and Monk Money Manager. Both sound like...
From Monk to Money Manager.
From Monk to Money Manager. Oh, I can't quite read the whole title. Thank you. All links will be in the description, and I hope you like the conversation. I loved it. It was great.
Thanks. And if any of your listeners want to reach out, you can find me on my website, douglynam.com, DOUGLYNAM.com, and I do financial and business coaching, and I'm also an investment advisor. So if anybody would like some help on any of those fronts, I'm happy to have those conversations.
Excellent. And it does make it easy to reach out to them on the website. I noticed that. So, because some people don't. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. And everyone, be good to each other and be good to yourselves.